continuing his visit this hour. We're also following the demonstrations for racial justice in Seattle, Washington. President Trump is threatening to, quote, take back that city from the protesters, calling them anarchists and terrorists. Also tonight, coronavirus.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
All right, peace. Just testing this out. All right, just give me a minute. Oh.
Why is this not coming on?
All right, so we're just gonna be waiting a little while to get a couple more people in here. Let me see this waiting room if I can see that. Is there anybody else? Yep, waiting. Okay. All right. All right. So we'll just be waiting till about 6:15 or so to let people trickle in, and then we'll get started. You know how that's going off.
Okay, cool. Sorry. I'm gonna leave here because of someone.
Okay. And who is on Galaxy S10? If you could identify yourself. All right, so we're waiting for more people to get in here. So for those that just getting in, we're just waiting a little while, of like 6:15 or so, to get people in, and we'll get started. And also, too, I would like to get an identity on Galaxy S10. Who is Galaxy S10? Please identify yourself.
Jamal, maybe they don't know that that's what they appear as.
Oh, yeah, true.
But you could always put them in the they can rename themselves if they don't see their name on the participants list.
Right.
Let's see.
Okay, we got more folks coming in.
Hey, Jamal.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good.
All right.
Yo.
Hey, Priscilla, how are you?
Good. I'm gonna have to jump off in half an hour. I have a ward meeting, but I wanted to catch some stuff. I saw you on the news today, Jamal.
All right, give thanks. Yeah, so we'll be starting up,
Mm-hmm.
another 10 minutes or so. We're just trying to wait for some folks to get in here, but we already got a good amount. So that's good. All right. Okay, some people are responding on Facebook. Hopefully more people are coming in. Hopefully all of y'all spread the word as well. Definitely would like to get oh, pardon me. Some people are having a difficult time getting in. Let me see here. Oh, just let me get it. All right, hold on. Somebody else is waiting. Sorry, I'm trying to do too much. Okay, that person is coming in. But all right, while we're waiting, why don't we begin and do some like basic introductions? Let's really keep it brief because I've been on some of these and, that can turn into a whole 45-minute thing. So let's not do that. So let's just go around quickly, say your name, maybe where you're from or whatever, but let's keep it really brief, please. My name is Jamal Crawford, community activist, organizer. Thank you all for coming. Peace.
Peace, Yoga Mike's in the house.
Good evening, everyone. Cheryl Clyburn Crawford. I'm with the NAACP as well as the Executive Director of Mass Vote, and look forward to this conversation.
Good evening, everyone. Ashia N. Smith here. I'm a school social worker in the Boston Public Schools District and a member of the NAACP.
Somebody else. Let's go. Keep it coming.
Hi, this is Zeba Cranmer. I'm with JP Progressives, just here to listen and learn.
Great, thanks. Next.
My name is Aaliyah, and I live in Roxbury.
We could barely hear your audio.
Oh, my name is Aaliyah, and I live in Roxbury. Is that better?
Yep, much better. Thank you. Next up, anybody else? Brief introductions.
My name is Richard. I'm here in Dorchester, trying to listen in as well. Met you before as well, Jamal.
All right, peace. Thanks.
Peace to you, brother.
All right. Anybody else? Quick introductions. Name, where you from?
Stephen Godfrey, Quincy Geneva Housing Corporation. Hey, brother Jamal, we
Peace.
here.
Go ahead. Oh no, Antonio, you got to unmute. Oh, I could.
There we go. My bad. I got it. Antonio Arundel, Love Life Now, Sport and Society, community change for metanoia. Just want to hear some ideas, man. That's all.
All right. Let's see. Anybody else? Okay, Aisha.
A Galaxy S10.
Yeah, I don't know, but if they don't identify, I don't even know how to send a message.
I just put them in the waiting room and send them a message. It popped
Jamal.
up.
Hey,
Okay.
Jamal.
Yeah, I got it. Yep. Go ahead.
Okay, if you on the right-hand corner, if
Yeah,
you
I
put
got
your
it.
mouse, okay.
Yeah, I got it.
Hey, Jamal, I'm in transit, but I'm just letting you know it's me for real.
All
Christopher,
right.
Boston, and always listening and reporting.
Give thanks. Yeah, because obviously you can understand what I'm concerned about is getting Zoom bombed, and you know, we ain't going for that.
You should be fine because you have to let people in. So you might be all right because it's almost looks like you have a password and everything on your Zoom.
Yeah, except for people that I don't know or anonymous names or whatever. So
Just to clear up as well, my name is Valiant on here, and that's who Richard is. I just changed my name because I didn't really know if it was you that was hosting this.
yeah, it's all good.
All right, brother.
Okay, any other introductions we want to do real quick before we get into it? Who did not introduce themselves? Oh, okay. See, you just got on here, but your audio's off. You gotta turn your audio on.
Okay. Good evening, folks. Back at it. This is what is this the third edition or?
Yeah,
third
one.
You know, one thing I will say, myself, Brother Jamal, Brother Salih, Brother Carlos, we've been organizing these events for well over 10 years now. And it's great to see everybody engaged and wanting to get this information and excited about this information. It's important for us to really analyze where the information is coming from. It's when we have to figure out how to balance between those folks that are now enough to speak up and still welcoming them in and welcoming their voice, and then also acknowledging all the folks who've been kind of drudging in these waters for a long time when it was not as fashionable. So I'm excited about just the current environment and looking forward to staying helpful and staying engaged.
All right. So is there anybody else who needs to identify themselves before we move on?
I'm sorry, Jamal. I had to step away to take a phone call. This is Priscilla Flint Banks.
All right.
From the Black Economic Justice Institute and the Black Boston COVID-19 Coalition.
Okay. There we go.
I'll just say hi. My name is Teresa Rodriguez. I work at Boston Collegiate. It's a small charter school in Dorchester. I worked previously at the Dearborn. Glad to join.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome. All right. So I think that, just to kind of start off with a little background information, the whole, idea of this series, Black and Blue, was really discussing the relationships between the Black community and the BPD. My greatest challenge and struggle as an activist in this city dealing with policing has been the hero worship that goes on with the police here, where people want to act as if there is not a problem, right? So just in the past, these meetings were used to address and expose problems, but more often than not, as in always, we were going uphill, pushing against the grain, trying to talk about issues that many people either did not believe happen or exist, or they happened very minimally, And here in Boston, they are great at saying, oh, well, thank God we don't have that in our city, right?
Yep.
very disrespectful on two fronts. One, it's disrespectful of the administration who knows that that's a lie. And then it's also very disrespectful of some of the newer people who've come on who, while they are yelling out, the names of all sorts of people who've been killed by the police in New York and California and Philadelphia and Chicago and Baltimore and Ferguson, they get very light when it comes to anything that's happening here in Boston. And that has been my goal, to illuminate what has been happening here, to illuminate and then eliminate what has been happening here. So Black and Blue came out of that, and we've had these forums a bunch of times. I like to utilize experts, if you will. So I like to talk to a lot of lawyers. I like to talk to, professors, some sort of, someone with some legal expertise, various groups out there who have been helpful and participatory over the past several decades. The NAACP, the ACLU, Lawyers Committee, and then also two individual lawyers in this city, like Howard Friedman, who is world-renowned to get down in terms of police brutality, use of force, and the killing of civilians. And let me also just say that as a point of contention. I strive to differentiate between police brutality and the killing of civilians, because police brutality, in my view, you walk away from that. You come home from that, right? The killing of civilians is the highest and the most extreme form of police brutality, right? But it's very different than, you weren't just brutalized. You were taken out of here, right? So there's a certain level that I think that we have to also operate on. Okay, good. I'm glad Rasan is here. Rasan, if you would you get on here, please, and just introduce yourself for those who do not know?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Sir.
cool. Good evening, everyone. I'm Rasan Hall. I'm the director of the Racial Justice Program for the ACLU of Massachusetts. I used to be at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, and then before that, I was a prosecutor. So that experience, 8 years locking people up and sending them to jail, has really informed my perspective on what's wrong with the system. And so I see it as my penance to do everything I can to undo the harm that I did as a prosecutor, and use the privilege of this position and the platform that I had to try to do something to make a difference in our community.
Thank you for that. And so I think that'll be a good place to start, I think, because, as you can see from the title, the play on words there, the PPP, but our PPP is plans, policies, and proposals. So I want to use the entirety of this meeting time to really discuss what's been out there, what we've heard now, and some things that are coming down the pike, as well as other things that we may want to see that have not been addressed yet. So Rasan, if you could give us a good update on some of the things you've been working on, and also too your breakdown on some of the things that we've already heard from the city and the state, state electeds.
Yeah, I mean, these last 3 months have been crazy. I thought, like, okay, well, I'm gonna be working from home, so things are gonna get much easier and slow down some. But trying to respond to the COVID pandemic is created a new level of energy for, I think, all of us. But I think that's what makes all of this activity around policing that much more prevalent, because the murder of George Floyd just highlights, that's like the tip of the iceberg. That reveals some of the greater inequities and injustices in our communities, and especially now that we've been living through COVID and we've seen how our communities are disproportionately impacted by that. And so this time feels a little different, and the policy prescriptions that are coming out are seeming to get some traction that they hadn't gotten before. You know, the Mass Black and Latino Legislative Caucus came out with a 10-point policy proposal of the things that they are looking to do, and they broke it out by, you know, the kind of top 3 issues at the federal level. Then I think the next kind of 5 were at the state level, and then the final 2, if I did my math right, were at the municipal level, or maybe it was the other way around. And that, you know, includes, you know, bringing an end to qualified immunity, which is a legal doctrine which grants police officers protection from liability for misconduct in the event that the misconduct that they were engaged in, or the constitutional violation that they were engaged in, was not clearly established. So basically, if the thing that the cop did wrong was not previously litigated and determined to be a constitutional violation, then the officer would benefit from qualified immunity. And it's absolutely ridiculous, and the doctrine has expanded out of proportion. You know, there's also been efforts to, you know, put limits on police use of force. By, you know, banning the use of choke holds and neck holds or knee holds or any other type of move that would restrict blood flow or airflow. The creation of commissions to study structural and institutional racism. There's been pushes to create civilian review boards. And, you know, there's a debate around the value of those, especially if they don't have subpoena power. There have been resolutions proclaiming the injustice of police brutality. Representative or Congresswoman Presley filed those resolutions, but she's also filed a bill, actually, to a bill that would eliminate qualified immunity. Here in Massachusetts, we're pushing for what's called a post system, or peace officer standards and training system, which would create the ability to license and de-license officers. Massachusetts is one of 4 states that doesn't have that system. You know, I think we have to be careful with that because, you know, Minnesota had a post system, and you see what happened there. So if it's not a strong post system, it's not worth having one. So those are some of the things that are in play. You know, we also want to use this as an opportunity to pivot to some of the larger or some of the other criminal law reform issues that have been happening. We want to collect the data on use of force. We need to know every time an officer has used inappropriate force on someone, because there's no way you can't manage what you don't measure. You know, we want to ban the use of facial recognition technology by law enforcement officers. We want to outlaw the use of tear gas and other chemical weapons. But we also want to make sure that our businesses are okay, right? And that there are appropriate mental health and substance use treatment services in our communities. And when you look at the Boston Police Department budget, and then you look at the Department of Public Health in the city of Boston, they're way out of line, and especially when we're in the midst of a health pandemic. So there are several things in play right now, and they're all moving at different speed. But I think here, at least here in Massachusetts, we're probably going to see something coming out next week from the governor, and then the House and Senate are going to be able to add to it. And so I think now is the time for the community to say, these are the things that we want to see. There's already a lot of stuff that's been put in the cake, and it's pretty much in the oven baking. But it doesn't mean that other reforms that the community demands or pushes for can't be included in there. So so I thank you, Jamal, for one, the opportunity to talk, but two, for having this forum so that people can begin to, catalyze this energy and put forward some policies and some plans that we can move off of.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And so while we were talking, Jake, for those of you know who Jake, my homie, helps me out with a lot of the stuff there. He's put some links in there to, the shot by police. You see the database of all the people shot, mass police reform, police decertification. So all those links are up there. I also put in the images of what the elected officials put out, the 10-point plan. So just to recap on that, the 10-point plan, it's 4 points at the federal level. Point one, pass Congresswoman Presley's resolution to condemn police brutality, racial profiling, and excessive use of force. 2, improve oversight and independent investigations to hold individual law enforcement officers and police departments accountable. 3, Department of Justice must reassert its statutory authority to investigate individual instances of racial profiling, police brutality, and violence, and investigate and litigate individual law enforcement officers and police departments routinely violating civil rights. I could add on something to that too, because there's a genius brother, police officer, pardon me, I think he's out of Rhode Island, but he's like a lawyer and a cop. And he says something about I want to say Title 9 or Title 10 or whatever it is. But basically, it's like all of these departments, they get federal money. And when you get federal money, you can't violate federal stuff. So if you're violating, civil rights or human rights or constitutional rights, and you're receiving federal money, they can take that federal money away. So there's a way to attack that, to eliminate that. So, that should probably get added in that mix if it's not there already, because these are all bullet points, of course. The 4th point, adopt sound and unbiased law enforcement policies at all levels of government that reduce the disparate impact of police brutality, racial profiling, and use of force on Black and brown people and other historically marginalized communities. All right. At the state level, 5, 6, 7, and 8. 5, resolve to provide for a special commission on peace officer standards and training to study and make recommendations concerning the implementation of a statewide peace officer standing and training system that certifies police officers, enables decertification for misconduct and abuse. Right now, that's House Bill 2146, Representatives Holmes and Melvin Vieira. Pass House Bill 2292 by Representative Holmes that establishes an Office of Diversity and Equal Opportunity to establish guidelines and review for diversity plans for all state agencies, establishes a Peace Officer Exam Advisory Board to review examinations for appointment and promotion of peace officers. 7, pass House Bill 1440 by Rep. Holmes that establishes a commission to study how the systemic presence of institutional racism has created a culture of structural racial inequality, which has exacerbated disproportionate minority contact with the criminal justice system in Massachusetts. 8, adopt clear statutory limits on police use of force, including chokeholds and other tactics known to have deadly consequences, require independent investigation of officer-related deaths, and require data collection and reporting on race regarding all arrests and police use of force by every department. That bill is to be filed by Rep. Liz Miranda. The last of the 10-point plan, this is the municipal to city level. 9, declare that racism is a public health crisis and worthy of treatment, assessment, and financial investment in order to eradicate negative health impacts. 10, create a civil review board commission with subpoena power to investigate allegations of law enforcement and wrongdoing. Okay. So all well and good. They missed some key elements. I'll try to, go on them real quick. So 1, I realized long ago some critical errors that we as activists and organizers were making in dealing with policing. 1 was we didn't ask for enough a lot of the time. So we kept like chipping away at the rock and like one off and never really went comprehensive with it. So when you're talking about bad cops, right? We're not just talking about officer who beats up little Tyrone. I can guarantee you that officer who beat up little Tyrone has been practicing on his wife for years, right? So that 9 times out of 10, the same officer who's a jerk in our community, treating our people like crap, that same officer, he might have 3 use of forces, but he might have had 17 DUIs and 4 domestics, right? And the what I've seen, the gamut of offenses and charges by these officers, from sexual assaults, rapes, solicitation of prostitutes, child molestation and pedophilia, all these types of things that I've seen that runs the gamut that is so far out of police brutality. But when we're talking about bad apples, I'm telling you, they are all the same people. The ones who have issues with rage, they have issues with substance and alcohol abuse. These are problem people. So when we do that data collection, I believe one of the most important pieces of data to collect at the city level for Boston Police, at Rachel Rawlins level from Suffolk County, for those, whatever it is, 4 or 5 different police municipalities she deals with, and at the state level for an entire one, I want to see a database of every time an officer has come in contact with law themselves. Anytime they've been charged, convicted, or charged, arrested, or convicted. I want to see that database, and I want to see what that looks like. So that's 1. 2, at the city level, long ago, well, not long ago, but a couple years ago, in my conversations with Commissioner Evans expressed to me his frustrations because he had a police reform that he was trying to push it through. And I was like, wow, you're the commissioner. How come you can't get a reform through? They won't give it to me. So all he wanted is the little, like if you're in the military and you got the little square rectangle name badge above your shirt pocket. So mine would just say J. Crawford. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
He wanted that. They ready to fight him in the streets. Okay, they don't want no change. But see that, I told him, I don't know why his reasoning for it was, but for me, as a kid, they say if something's going wrong, you ask the cop for your badge number. That's almost asking for a beating, right? So if you can avoid, any kind of thing like that, but if I'm having a conflict with you and I could already see on your shirt that you're T. Sullivan, right? That gives me an advantage without me having to ask, hey, what's your name? What's your badge number? Which is usually a provocation in their eyes.
Right.
So that's another simple one. City, state, and the other level, Suffolk County. Another thing, back to the Department of Justice, because this is Ayana's thing. Several years ago, I wrote a letter demanding that the Department of Justice come to Boston to investigate and help reform the Boston Police Department. They have an office itself called COPS. I think it's like Community Officer, Police Standards or something like that, where they come to a city, and once again, there's a sliding scale of how effective this is because they went to Baltimore with this. So but the Department of Justice will come into a city and they will try to professionalize the department so that the department is in line with all federal standards and training and all that type of thing. So generally, in my view is that it can't hurt. And I think that the more eyes and oversight and scrutiny and all that, the better, right? Lastly, my model for a civilian review board, this is another very critical point. Another place where activists and organizers, we've shot ourselves in the foot over the years, not asking for much. And it's along the same lines. Civilian review board, generally when people think about that, they're only thinking about police brutality and the killing of civilians, right? No, a civilian review board should have the purview over the whole enchilada.
Right.
We are the civilians. We are the citizens. We are the taxpayers, right? If all the citizens in the city of Boston said, you know what, we don't like blue anymore. We don't want blue as the color of the uniforms. Y'all in public safety, we think y'all will be better. We want you to have orange uniforms. And as long as they could show that the majority of the citizens really wanted that, like if it went on a ballot or whatever, the civilian review board would be like, no, we want this to represent. And if you remember when, this is maybe about a year, maybe 2 years ago, the Boston police wanted to purchase, I think it was like 300 AR-15 assault rifles, right? See, the civilian review board would have been able to say, okay, I see what you want to do, but we, as the citizens, the civilians who you're supposed to be protecting and serving, We don't like that. We find that that's not a good look. We don't want y'all with them assault weapons. So the Civilian Review Board would be able to have review over the entire police department. Matters of budget, matters of training. Hey, we just got a new grant for $300,000. We're gonna spend it on new SUVs and no. $300,000. Now we want that to go towards de-escalation and mental health services and youth outreach, that type of thing. So my Civilian Review Board, once again, is all encompassing. Okay. So that's a couple of the things right there. I'll shut up for now and I want to open it up to anybody else.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in.
All right, let's go.
I wanted to jump in just to build on when you were talking about the type of officers that were involved in some of these things. And I think like the mental health piece, I think there was a point there. It didn't really spell out mental health specifically, but it talked about training. Because part of that is being able to weed these people out. You know what I'm saying? And it's like sometimes you see people, I've seen people that I know since I came to Boston, I'm like, he's on the force? She's on the force? When clearly they don't need to be there. So I think like there needs to be a stronger mental health component and training component to really find out like what you can do under pressure. Because that's the other thing, you know, you have a lot of frontline people that under pressure, they don't know what to do. Allegedly, one of these new jacks that was out with George Floyd talking about maybe we should roll him over. He needs to feel, he or she that's out there like that needs to feel empowered, I think, to be able to be like, nah, that dude's fucked up. He needs to, I need to go over there and do something regardless of what the thin blue line says. But that's a big component because you got a lot of people out here on these streets that mentally they are just not prepared to do this work. They're not built for this. They're built to intimidate. They're built to obfuscate what's going on, you know, and maybe a lot of times exacerbate the situation because they don't have the mental capacity to calm it down.
Can I say something, Jamal?
Absolutely.
Antonio, I already know, folks. We talked about the numbers that you would like to get together as far as the numbers of officers who have violated some type of law. Remember, those numbers will be skewed because a lot of women will not report that the husband's just cleaning the gun over and over and over on attack
Right.
as a form of intimidating. You ain't gonna call nobody. You know what I'm saying? But those numbers will be way off because it's not being reported. And the guys that I get as clients, war officers, they get put on the desk real quick, or they do the what's they call traffic stop, and they go to my program, and they don't even do the whole 40 weeks. You know, it looks good. You're gonna do 5 weeks, 6 weeks with pops, and it's like that's why I left. I'm blackballed now because at the end of the day, if they say you have to let them go, release them. I gotta release them or lose my job. You know what I'm saying? And the probation officers working with them, you know, keep everything clean and all that kind of, I mean, it got dirty. You know, so it's like that number will be different for you, man. Definitely. If we request that, it's gonna be different, you know.
Oh, absolutely. There's gonna be big elements of non-reporting. And I would also like to see almost a mandatory if you see something, say something thing because
bystander piece, yeah.
Yeah, because most of my information that I get on dirty cops comes from other cops. But they're telling me they're not reporting it to the authorities. So by the time you reporting it to me, it's just like it's, you know, just a fraction above the level of gossip. There's no, you know, it serves no purpose. And particularly
like, how do you address that?
Particularly in one case, which was recent, a captain is well known as an abuser, and his wife works in the BPD as well, in another position, like, you know, she's I don't know, maybe administrative or something. And the person was telling me how vicious this person is and how everybody knows how it is. The wife has come to work some days with sunglasses on and stuff. And you know, and other times she can't pull that off. So he's like, Jamal, all you would have to do to see that is pull up her employee record and look at how many times she's called out sick. Because she's calling out sick, it ain't the cold and the flu. It's black and blue. Yep. Okay?
Dang.
And everybody knows.
But
I like to
And
say something.
that demands a cultural change. You know what I'm saying? Because
Right.
if you're seeing all these things, but there's nobody that you can report to, then yeah, you got to take the, you know what I mean? You got to go through the whole thing and really break that down. And that's all training and intelligence and experience. There's no policy that you could put in place that would eradicate that if the expectation and the experiences and the mindset of the people are still saying, well, we got to do it the old traditional way.
Yes.
And if you beat the woman that you stood up with in a church and in front of all your family and friends and vowed to love and all that, you got kids with and a house with, if you beat the heck out of her, what will you do to me?
Right.
Right.
This issue, the issue around the internal affairs of complaints, Jamal, I think that's a piece that, we talked about it briefly. That's one of those things that really should be part of the civilian review, because you have so many people, and a lot of times in our community, you may get harassed or get assaulted, and you're just happy that you got out of there alive. Or you're happy you're happy that you didn't get locked up.
Right.
But you still have a valid complaint. You still have a solid harassment initiative, but everybody knows how cumbersome that process is. So that a lot of times they rather just say, I'm not even. So for every complaint we have, there's probably 4 or 5 people who just said, you know what, I'm happy that I'm alive. I'm happy that I'm not in jail, but based on this encounter. So that may be a thought, just to add another layer so that civilians can just go to another civilian board to say, hey, this is what happened to me. This is how it went down. This is something we should, I want you guys to look into. And then I'm sure that a lot of the complaints will be looked at a lot different.
You mean in the sense of not having like a stigma of being silent or something?
Well, that's part of it, but the other part is just the intimidation factor, the cumbersome process.
Yeah.
If you were to say to a cop, hey, what do I need to do to file a complaint? Well, you have to go to police headquarters. You got to fill out a form. Then you got to go meet with another officer. By that point, it's like you don't really have faith that you're going to get any real justice. So you don't. So you end up just leaving it alone. And like I said, we're so trained to be happy to be alive. We don't consider how many times we either got violated or got discriminated against or profiled. Yep. So those things should be that's at least something we can track and get a better count of.
So
can I springboard off of that training? Can I springboard off of that word training real quick, just because C brought it up? What we're playing around with too is we got to look at their end. One of the things that made me not want to be in the court system, y'all remember I used to be a security guard there that checks the metal detectors and all that. When we first got on, they took us out to New Braintree to train with the state police barracks. And one of the first things they taught us is this thing called verbal judo. Like you direct your words and your tone and how you attack somebody or approach somebody to try to get some sort of reaction out of them. So that's part of the training we get to look at too, because we should be able to, I think it was during the broadcast of the elected officials talking about the experiences, and one brother got up and said, I had my dome light on, I had my hand on the steering wheel, and the first thing the brother said to me is, are you stupid? Like those words are loaded up because he saw a Hispanic man. He's like, if I can get the rise out of him to send this thing a certain way. So they're playing games. That's part of their training too that we have to look into. They are trained to cause issues when they feel it's right. Again, it's called verbal judo. I know they try to teach it to us because they try to swing the energy and get a person to react. And based on statistics, what we know about people, if somebody's hungry and you dangle some fruit in front of their face, they're going to act a certain way. So if somebody's already living in situations where they're not happy, they're not paid, they're not fed well, and you talk to them certain ways, man, look at the difference when you pull somebody over in another town. Like we go to the South End to where those fancy bistros are. When they pull you over, run up on you, say, excuse me, ma'am, do you know why I stopped you? May I see your license or registration? But when it's us, it's, are you stupid? What's the matter with you? And then it excites a certain energy. So we got to watch that part too, because that's part of the training.
All right. I just wanted to say the complaint process in the BPD is seriously flawed. Everybody knows that. But it's backed up right now. They're in a backlog, hundreds of cases, and years behind. You know, they're like people are waiting 3 years to get any kind of even a word, and that word is usually like, we're still working on it. We'll get back to you. You know. So that could definitely be done. And at some point too, another big proposal I have is if y'all remember when they chose the superintendent of Boston Public Schools, you know, they'll have a couple of candidates. They take them around the little community forums, and you know, everybody grills them, and you know, that's the process I want to see for police commissioners, because when Walsh chose Gross, I know in his brain he thought he was doing a smart thing. You know, everybody wants a black commissioner and blah blah blah. I'll speak for myself and just say that this commissioner has not been good and has been disappointing, and a lot of the rhetoric that he has been espousing is moves us backwards. Okay, from the very first statements that he made attacking, I can't remember what order it was, but first, you know, the judges, the DA, and if you know all this old cop stuff, this is age-old stuff. It ain't our fault. We lock them up. They let them out. It's them. It's them. So that's an old trope that they do and whatnot. And then the other thing, while y'all seeing all around the country, we got white deputies and sheriffs and police chiefs from Hicksville, USA, and they're taking off their riot gear and they're marching with people and raising the fist and all this type of stuff. And up here, our first black police commissioner saying Blue Lives Matter. So we just have to be real careful. And the next go around, we can't allow the mayor to just pick a commissioner. We have to insist on a community process for the picking of a police commissioner. So that is it as well. Louis Elisa says what we need to take into consideration is that most of what the police do is for economic purposes and to maintain their privileges within society. Absolutely.
Yes.
And not for nothing too, there should be no profession in the world where you can go in, very limited education, your base pay might be $40,000-$45,000 a year, but you can come up on $250,000 a year, overtime and all that. Not for nothing. They put out the reports like every year of how much the employees get paid. And I hate to use them for an example, but I'm gonna. Y'all know Officer Grubbs, right?
Yeah.
So Officer Grubbs, everybody know him, super cool and all that, but he's not like super cop or nothing. He's a pretty regular kind of cop, right?
Right.
$300,000 a year. So, you know, so things like that too. The inordinate salaries and the padding of the hours for details and all of that type of stuff. There's a lot of corruption there too, where our tax dollars are getting burnt up. So we also have to find a way to get Willie on this, because, so for instance, the internal affairs process needs to be completely revamped. And
it all does.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
My whole thing is, my son was killed by Boston police, and they covered the whole thing up. I'm livid right now because I'm black and I can't afford. First of all, when my son was murdered, not one black attorney stood up and said, "I'm gonna help this woman." That's the first battle you deal with. You don't have good representation, and most of us can't afford it. I cried into the phone and got someone to represent me. You can always go in. We need to hold courts and judges accountable, because you can always go into the court, file a complaint against a police officer. I work in a court. There are other people who are behind the counter that will be like, why are you filing it against the cop? They want you to explain the story there, which is not necessary. They want you to know what law you're going to charge the officer with, which we don't know. All we know is you're abusing me, you're harassing me, so we don't know what to put down if you don't know the laws. Half these cops don't know the law, so how are they on the street upholding them?
Right.
We need to, so much. So you can go in court and file a complaint. You're not going to get fired because the people behind the counter are going to stop you. That's first and foremost. Second of all, the jury pool needs to be overhauled, because when they did my son's case, it wasn't a jury of my son's peer. I sat in that jury room and they must have thought I was a juror too. The first question they asked was, if the person is from a low-income family, would you be biased? A third of the hands went up. The second question was, were you related to, married to, or work with a police officer? Half the hands in the room went up. There was 3 African-American people on the jury pool. Everybody was trying to get out of doing their civic duty. All 3 black people were let go. I sat and watched a white woman and white man in front of me debating what questions they were going to raise their hand to and what they were going to say so they would not get picked. The gentleman was sent home. The woman was number 12 juror on my son's jury. Juror number 4 went to sleep. Juror number 7 cried after everything was over because I believe she felt like she was forced to go along with the gang.
Wow.
Court was a sham. I'm angry because, I put myself through school without the help of anybody. And I got my master's degree, but if I had not had that, they would have swept my son's murder under the rug. Everything about my son's stop. My son was pulled over in a routine traffic stop. Everything about it was wrong. The first initial report that I got was 4 lines, and because I questioned that, it took them 45 minutes to get me that report. So when I questioned that, they told me come back Saturday. When I came back Saturday, it was a 2-page report, and it said nothing with the first page report. The 4 lines said, they pulled my son over, my son fled, the car was called off, the officers proceeded, caught my son pulled a gun, fired a shot at the officer, they returned fire, shooting my son in the chest. So when the autopsy came back and my son didn't have a hole in the chest, the story changed. They said my son grabbed the gun and put it to the officer's head. The gun that they supposedly found at the scene did not have my son's fingerprints on it. But yet they called in this expert witness, and in court, their expert witness testified that what the officer was saying was not true. So then they tried to discredit her. They also brought in an expert witness who has a spotty record. They pay him over and over again to come in and say whatever it is they want him to say. They need to be eliminated. They should not be allowed to testify. Their testimony should not be worthy. Judges who have tenure should not be there because 1, you've been there too long and you're at the point where you don't give a shit. You're not upholding laws. You're not following the evidence, because if you did, those 2 officers would have not have walked away not guilty of murder. When they pulled my son over, it was a black officer on one side, a white officer on the other side. My son asked them 4 times, why you pulled me over? They didn't answer. My son had the window cracked about this much, and they kept asking, they asked my son for his license and registration. He kept saying, why you pull me over? They wasn't responding, so my son gave him the license. The officer claimed he didn't look at the license, pass it to his other officer. Now get this. This officer had a warrant in his hand. The warrant to the car that my son was driving was his friend, but these officers knew this gentleman was already in jail. This warrant had someone else's name on it. So when my son asked you his license, how come y'all right now? How come that here? You put the license on top of the car, you reached in the car and grabbed my son took off. You start chasing my son jumps out the car and runs into Tent City where we lived for 10 years because he knows somebody else, he knows everybody over there and somebody out there is going to see this. When they're running, my son tries to go into a old daycare and he couldn't, and he turns around and puts his hands up. The officer shoots. There is a videotape of this. There's a videotape of this and there's a witness. The witness chose not to show up in court. The videotape was taken by the commissioner. He went to rescue his son who was in the commission of committing a felony in the daytime. He was breaking and entering in the daytime. So he took the tape from my son's scene, went to deal with his son, and the security guard quit. I lived in Tent City for 10 years. There's no way that the cameras are not gonna work. All of a sudden, everybody who's seen this video, they sent in a letter saying the video no longer works. An investigator investigates and finds that when the shot goes off, there's a gentleman walking in the pathway. He drops his bag and runs. In the corner of that video, you can see my son's hands up. They shoot, the officer shoot my son. My son's head drops back and his body drops, refuting everything that the police said. The judge didn't look at this evidence. Every piece of evidence, first of all, the whole courtroom, the whole half of the courtroom was officers dressed in blue. Then it was my side of the family with support I had there who were normal people who they were trying to intimidate. Everything that their attorney said or used, they had so much time to refute it, to use it, whatever they want. When my attorney used that same evidence, oh, come on, okay, that's it, let's move on. Next, You know, it was just a hurry up and rush and let's get out of this courtroom kind of situation. And it was not guilty. My heart broke. And I couldn't afford to appeal this. So, and then they was telling me that it's $2.70 per transcript if I want to appeal.
Well, thank you for your strength.
Huh?
I said thank you for your strength.
You know, it's the Peace Institute, it's the support, it's legacy live on, and it's the fact that I want justice. Like, you're not just going to kill my son and walk away from here and just go on like, my whole thing that I'm pissed with is how Commissioner Gross and Marty Walsh come out and there's so much in support of changing all these laws because rest in peace, George Floyd died. But what about who died here at the hands of your officers? My son's name had not been mentioned until Monica Cannon did this thing, but I've been fighting for 7.5 years. Where was all that support back then? You can't fix something if you don't admit you have a problem. You can't keep saying we're a city away. No, we are that city. My son is George Floyd, damn it. Where's my justice? Right. There was nothing offered to me. I had to hold a bucket in front of headquarters to bury my child. And with the help of the Peace Institute, I got a headstone.
Can we for the sake of just trying to keep everybody engaged, because we have a lot of people on. I know Aaliyah wanted to make a comment next, and if everybody else could just mute so that the background noise doesn't interfere.
Yes.
Aaliyah, jump in.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. I don't have a whole lot of faith in retraining because it becomes a good cop versus bad cop situation. I know a cop who sent out a Facebook post. He's been training officers for 30 years in the academy. All he talked about was how we have great cops in Boston. Now, and besides that, there is no training that can keep white police officers from being afraid of Black people. There's no training for that. There's no training to have white cops change their idea and their mind and how they view Black people. There's no training for that. The last thing I would say is they call themselves Brothers in Blue. You will not find someone who's gonna mess with their brothers $300,000 a year. That's not gonna happen. So even if someone had the courage, a police officer, to report another police officer, he had better be willing to leave his job and go live somewhere else, because whoever else is in his precinct or whatever is gonna have it out for him. That's just fact.
I want to say something to respond to that. I think that what should happen is there needs to be an anonymous tip line for not just the police officers, but also for the citizens of this state who can report police abuse to the committee, not to the police, to the committee that would be established to investigate these incidents. The second thing I think needs to happen is we need to start doing extensive background checks. Let the FBI take over the background checks. Some of these people who are doing the policing, excuse my French, they didn't start this shit, today, okay? Right. This stuff has been going on way before then, and now they're just in a position of power to exercise it. Right. Okay, so that needs to be done. We need, the FBI does an extensive background check, they go way back, okay? So you will be exposed. Let's not have them be in these positions to do these types of things in the first place, okay? The second thing, the third thing was we need to think about as well, with the police officers that are there needs to be some psychological evaluations of them as well, to evaluate their behavior and their mindset. Because if they don't have the mindset and believe that all people matter, including Black people, then they shouldn't be on the force, okay? Another thing that needs to happen is that when you think about the jobs of the police officers, that's a lot of stress. They work all kinds of crazy hours. They're not eating properly. All that contributes to their mental state. So when you think about like people like like officers, like, you know, like armed forces, right? You wouldn't send a private to war every single year, right? You would cycle them on and you would cycle them off into different areas of the police force. So instead of having them go constantly and dealing with that kind of stress over and over and over, and then having their mindset change where they're doing things like this, you know, maybe put them in other positions in the police force. There's a lot of work that can be done. There's internet investigations of people who are trying to, you know, pedophilia and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of different areas of police work that can be done. Get them out of the community, get them into that, and then get them, then they can go on the beat, you know, periodically. So those, I just want to say that.
Yeah, right. And not only that, like, there's a whole group of police officers that could be doing details. It's really about looking at restructuring and how you're going to reorganize. I mean, I agree with the sister, you know, we're not winning hearts and minds of the white people, but I'm more concerned with the Black and brown people that are on the force that are trapped by this false ideal of to serve and protect, yet their people are not being protected and served. That's a psychological mind fuck. You know what I mean? You join the police force because you want to help people, or something happened in your family and the police didn't respond. Now you got to deal with Officer McCluckfuck, who want to tell Black jokes all the time, leave things in the locker, do little subtle subbies and microaggressions. That's the training that I'm talking about, that our officers need to understand and be of strong mind to deal with that, because they're bringing that into the streets. So then you got Black cops harassing Black youth and Black families because they're following some dumbass white officer, you know, for some false blue line theory. Like, I don't know. I just think that really it starts with that. I think having civilians overlook what's going on and really getting good people, not just putting someone on, or not just being like, okay, Violence in Boston, you're the group, so we're going to have you be on the civilian review board and you're going to find all the people. No, like, it shouldn't work like that. And that's what happens a lot of times. From my experience working in the city for a long time, I worked in the mayor's office for a long time, seeing the other side, and it is always about a power struggle, and it's always too about, we got to put in who we know, so whatever we're trying to do is protected.
I keep politics out of it. This has nothing to do with politics. This is about the people, you know, and that's what you're paid to do, is to serve the people. So keep politics out of it, and let's go forward.
I think it's time that your license, every other profession has a license right now. When they do something, they don't lose. They don't lose a license. They don't lose money. They don't lose sleep. They lose nothing. So I think that should be a requirement now.
Well, I mean, to say, well, my only issue is that that becomes a career of policing, like, the community. It's like, I think the genuine nature of serving and protecting isn't as much there as it is now, more a career option. And I think that's also part of the issue, because then people think, oh yeah, I can make like $300,000 a year being a police officer, so let me get into the force for that reason. You know, it's not more like about respecting the badge and respecting the community. It's more about respecting the badge and the bonus that you're getting the money, or rather getting the money and respecting the badge as a bonus.
Absolutely. And also to the point about the training, you know, I've been saying that for a long time, because, you know, I remember there was a big conflict, and at that time, the commissioner and Dan Linsky had invited me up to the police academy. You know, Jamal, come on, you have so many questions. Why don't you come up here and see our training? I said, I'm not coming up there to see your training. I've never had questions about your training. The question is not about your training. I know you can run an obstacle course, you do little cartwheels and all that stuff, whatever. The question is, what happens when you deviate from your training, right? Because I told him, you're not trained to beat your wives, but you do. You're not trained to sniff cocaine, but y'all do. You're not trained to drive drunk, but you do. So the question is not what your training is, but what happens when you deviate from your training. So training, one thing, and they definitely need training and all that, but what happens in the disciplinary factor? Because if you're a cop and you got 7 drunk drivings and 5 domestics, you know, that's a problem. So certain things I think should be immediately fireable. I'll give you a good example. people talking about the chokeholds and all that. Well, first of all, most people don't know chokeholds are already illegal. So that's number one. Hold on, you gotta turn your sound off. Chokeholds are already illegal, right? So the question is not if we make chokeholds illegal. The question is if an officer does a chokehold, this is a person who went through the academy. He knows it's illegal. I know it's illegal. I never been a cop, never wanted to be a cop. He already knows it's illegal. So then that way, when he does it, you automatically are in conscious violation of the oath you took for your job, which violates the terms of your employment. If you work for a hotel and you know you're not supposed to be looking in the ladies' bathroom, right? And they catch you looking in the ladies' bathroom, you lose your right to be employed here because you violated a condition of employment. So it's those type of violations I thought you thought they were not explicitly banned. Okay, so chokeholds, there's a variety of different types of chokeholds. So I mean, you know, I don't know, you know, whatever. Sleeper holds, you know, your thumb in somebody's, you know, obstructing their windpipe. These are all illegal. They're illegal moves in fighting. They're illegal, you know, it's just known that that's dirty pool. That's playing dirty games. Cops know that. And another thing that never got brought up with the guy, the whole knee on the neck thing, if you notice, his hand was in his pocket, he's exerting more force. So hopefully when he gets sentenced, I hope they add on some extra ears for that extra little gesture that he did there too, because it wasn't just the knee. He was also exerting extra pressure. So in any event, we need more stronger, no-nonsense discipline practices for what happens when a cop does something outside of what they're supposed to do. But listen,
like proper guidelines.
Exactly. So so there's a couple more people on here who I really want to get on. I know I believe Tanisha is still on here from the NAACP, Boston NAACP president. Senator Diane Wilkerson is here as well. So let me start with Senator Wilkerson. Please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. I actually probably should, Jerome, I thank you for the acknowledgement, but I should probably wait until after Tanisha talks, because my comment is about what's on the table and start talking about some things that we can do. So if you don't mind, I would just assume to wait until I hear, and I assume she's going to talk about some of what's going on, and then I do want to speak.
Okay. All right. So Tanisha, if you would take the floor and unmute yourself, Madam President. Okay.
I'm back.
All right. Let's see. Let's see. Is Tanisha? We're gonna wait. We're gonna wait on Tanisha for a sec. If Rasan, could you text Tanisha and tell her we're trying to get her on right quick? And if anybody else in the meantime has anything else that they would like to add, let's do that while we wait for Tanisha, and then we'll go to the senator.
I add something real quick. I had the opportunity, a chance in the past maybe 7 years ago, to train the Boston Police cadets, or even some of the neophytes of the new second year training around the bystander, how important that is. And we talk about the Kitty Genevieve story. You could see not saying they were too young to understand that, but when we talk about the Kitty Genevieve's effect is waiting for somebody else to stop something from happening. And a lot of them struggle with that. So with going forward is making the discipline you talk about is this should teach them how to be accountable for it before they hit. That's true. So now you see something, say something. That courage you're talking about, we can see that they don't have it before we let them go, and we still let them go. So when we're rebuilding this thing, we have to find a way to work on that part. That they don't have the courage when they hit the street. They got to be built with it first before they get out. I don't know how we're going to test that or anything, but it needs to be find a way to do that. You know.
I got a question.
At this point, by the time, if you commit a basically with the chokehold and all these other transgressions, in my opinion, you're committing a criminal act. So at that point, you're no longer a cop, you're a criminal, okay? And if there's anybody with you and they participate or they just stand there and they watch by while you do it, to me, they're accessory to the fact, period. So you wanna be a criminal, then you're gonna get charged as a criminal, you know? And that's how I feel. I think that enough is enough. We gotta say that especially if you're supposed to be the one that knows the law and you decide to not abide by it and you commit a criminal act, you're a criminal now. So if it was any of us, we would have been in jail in 30 seconds and all the people that would have been with us would have been in jail immediately, okay? You don't get special privileges for that. You committed a crime, okay? Not only that, you just, it was recorded, it was all there. So get arrested, okay, and go to jail, period. That's how I feel about it.
The only time I ever seen people blatantly disrespect the rules out of rage or anger, it's going back to like my football days when brothers were cheating and using steroids. Like, do we check police officers? Like, because a lot of that rage that comes when you're using enhancements, like think about the psychology of the job. I'm just trying to, if I'm a weaker player on a football team and I know taking some steroids, we know how that goes. It's been happening for years. So what's stopping these guys who might be getting their butt kicked in training or around the obstacle course, like Jamal said, they're not doing the cartwheels well and they know they have to keep a physical fitness. And then they're getting their butt kicked in the street. What's stopping these dudes from pumping this poison into their veins? And then, like I said, that's the only time I would see people disregard the rules of football on and off the field is when they were pumping juice into their brains. And it's like, dude, why would you jump off the handle and go punch somebody in the face when you know that's going to cost us 15 yards? Then you look in their eyes and you would see like this steroid rage. I'm like, how many of these cops is pumping that stuff into their bodies too? Do we even check for that?
A lot.
Just to sustain their career.
So go ahead, Tanisha, unmute yourself and go.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry, I had to step away for a minute, but happy to be a part of the conversation, listen, and also share. And I appreciate everyone from what I've heard so far. I appreciate what folks have shared. Specifically, Carla, I hear you, and I feel you. So thank you for sharing earlier. So with the NAACP, there are a few things going on. We have, for the past couple of weeks, really been trying to convene community, specifically convene the Black community. Although there have been, folks from other communities participating in the conversation, we've tried to be very intentional about convening the Black Boston community during this time. As we know, so many pieces of legislation are being advanced by elected officials, and also policy changes are being kicked around by elected and appointed officials. One of the things that became real clear to us real quick was that there was not community voice really being taken into consideration as folks were trying to push certain priorities. And so we've been trying to convene community for the past couple of weeks, and this past yesterday put out a list of community-based demands. There are 10 of them. It is not an all-inclusive list. Admittedly, one of the things, we have about 30 some odd organizations that have signed on to these demands. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was highlight the 10 where there was agreement, recognizing that there are, for many of us, other priorities that we will continue to advance as individual organizations. And so that was put out yesterday. The first two on the list, one is, and I heard the conversation earlier about the Civilian Review Board with subpoena power. And the second is, the post legislation. So those are the top two. We all know that it is likely that we are going to get some form of post. And it is possible that we'll get a civilian review board, just to name those two. But the devil's in the detail. As I've heard folks talk about, how we select, if we get a civilian review board, how folks are selected to serve on that review board is going to make a difference. We don't want an impotent board like the co-op. We want a board that actually has power and exercises that power on behalf of the people. So for us, we're looking at this, in kind of, there are many steps, right? We're going to continue to push for some of these legislative and policy changes, but we're also going to be very vocal about how these things are advanced once we get to the implementation phase, and also how we make sure that there's accountability with these things. The other piece is we have been advocating, and it's touched upon on the demand list, but this was something where, not everyone was in a complete agreement, but we have been advocating as an organization, in addition to what's seen on the demand list, for a complete review and overhaul of the police department policies. You all know, you talk about BPD, one of the first things that comes up when in speaking with the department is that our department has been recognized as, a leading department on issues as it relates to community policing. And that may be true. But what we have, the position that we've taken in this moment is that, even if that is true, we are now in 2020, and any high functioning organization has a part of its process, regular review of its policies. And so we are advocating for that, and making sure that the review is done with a racial equity lens and through a racial equity framework, being very intentional about the impact of policing on communities of color, generally speaking, but the Black community specifically. So that's, as an example, one of the things that we are really pushing with the administration. The final thing I'll say is this. We've also been very intentional about trying to get a better, trying to pull in where we can, the unions. And I know, Jamal, this is something that you've talked about too, with bringing in police officers into the conversation, members of law enforcement into the conversation. We also we have a very good relationship with MAMLEO. They're obviously not, a bargaining unit, but what we want to do is also make sure that no one can say that they were not given an opportunity to be a part of the conversation. That being said, we are very clear and unwavering in our position that significant policing reform must happen, and that we need to see major movement, meaningful movement within the next 4 to 6 weeks, both within the legislature and also within some of these executive offices.
Okay, thank you, Tanisha. Senator Wilkerson, are you there?
I am.
All right, beautiful.
Hi, everybody. There's a few things. First, Jamal, thank you for the convening again. There are a few things that I wanted to share with folks, and I think one has to be the spirit in which I make my comments, because I think one of the issues that we've been dealing with for a while and too long as our community is that we've been too nice, not only too nice to the folks who are doing the disservice, the devilment, and too nice to each other. And by that I mean watching folks walk in to spaces to represent on issues that they know nothing about. And they're just so excited to be invited. And that part of the reason why things are so confused for us as a people is because we have so many people who don't understand the concept of staying in their lane. It's okay. It's okay to say, I don't know, right? It really is okay to say, I don't know. And maybe you should call X. Maybe you should call Jamal. Maybe you should call Sagan on body cameras. Maybe you should call Tanisha, because that's the NAACP, still the only civil rights organization in the United States of America whose sole mission is to advocate to and abolish racial discrimination, racial violence, wherever you see it, whether it's in school, police. So that's what happens. I know a little bit about it, but I'm not an expert. So you'll hear me talk a lot about economics, but you won't hear me pushing my way and elbowing people out of the way to talk about this topic. And so just ask us all, to be careful. Walking in a protest doesn't make you an expert. It doesn't. May have you experienced, but it does not make you an expert. So here's number one. Number one, last week I saw something that didn't make a bit of sense to me, still doesn't make sense. And that was, got caught up in the moment, our elected officials who had the press conference on the State House steps to announce a list of demands, which, by the way, they talked to nobody about, not before. And even since then, there's not like the next day they called and said, for any group of people, let's do a Zoom, let's do a meeting, let's talk about what it is that we announced yesterday that are now our demands. It doesn't work like that. The second, and probably the most important, is the elected officials are the policymakers. They don't do demands. We make demands to them. So I'm now completely at a loss. How are my elected officials doing demands? Who to demand to? You're the policymaker. You're the one who's supposed to fix this. I'm still not clear on what that was like. I can't figure that one out yet. And I see some of you smiling. I'm not trying to be funny, but what the hell? How are the people who are supposed to be fixing it going to make them? Who are they making the demands to? The God? I don't get it. I don't get that. Don't get it at all. Because that's the person who's supposed to be representing us. So who were they demanding to? Somebody can ask. I don't care. The third thing you ought to know about me, if you don't know, I don't say anything that I'm afraid if somebody repeats it. My theory is if it comes out of your mouth and there's more than you in the room, that you have to expect that somebody's gonna run and tell. I actually don't care if you do, because I'm not saying anything that's not true.
Right.
Okay, so you can tell whoever you want. Maybe they'll answer you, because I haven't gotten an answer yet. What the heck, right? So that's it. Number 4. I have actually been in one of the rare opportunities. I did training at the police academy in Boston during my time as a state senator. Every year for almost 10 years, I would go there to explain racial profiling to them. On another day and another time, I will explain to you some of the responses that I would get from the officers that were there about to graduate from the academy. So much so that more than once I would say to the administrator, so you getting ready to give that person that just asked me that question a gun and put them on the street? Because they scared me. So make no mistake, somebody said earlier, you can't train people into not being a racist.
Right.
So our focus has to be on policies that admonish and challenge and chastise and punish bad behavior. This is not about changing people's minds. It's about changing their behavior. And Carla, I talk about her son all the time, because I think she shouldn't be the only one asking the question. And that's part of what happens. We don't want to talk to these women, because it's normally the women, that club that nobody wants to be in, who have lost children to violence or to the police. And so we leave them out there by themselves. This one, there still needs to be an answer. There needs to be an answer. Ms. Coleman called the police because her son was having an episode in the South End last year, and an hour later he's dead. There needs to be an answer. And so when they say most police are good, we need to define what good means, because good can't mean I stood there and watched. We need to be redefining what is good. Because if good is defined, the people by officers who don't break the law, follow the rules, and don't allow anybody around them to break the law. It's not this, 99% of them. No, it's probably 60.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably 60. We can't be standing here pretending that we don't have lawsuits right now. In the last year, the MCAD has found as a matter of law that the Boston Police Department cadet program disciplines Black and Latino cadets worse, disparately, negatively, in a different manner than the way they discipline white cadets. That's not my opinion. That's an MCAD finding.
Mm-hmm.
We have in the last year a lawsuit that said that the promotion process, right, was discriminatory against Black police officers and Latino police officers. That's not my opinion. That is the court that said that. So we need to figure out what that means. You can't keep letting the city or the state or the commissioner or the mayor stand in a public place and say, most of our officers are good and we've had progress. No, we haven't. We don't have progress until you stand up there and say, we are wrong. We have a problem. We need to fix it. The courts will keep telling you that your system is discriminatory at every phase. So what are we talking about? So we have right now an organization. I said the NAACP has a list of demands and seems to me and have incorporated almost all of the things that you all are talking about that we can fix and impact. And if they don't, then we need to be talking to the NAACP so that we can get on that list, whatever is mixed, and we all need to get around it, right? Like we all need to get around it. So every time they're talking, we need to be advertising. We need to be on Facebook, social media, emailing, a telephone number where people can just call and say, I support their demands, period. It's not a difficult thing to do. But I think when they start counting those telephone numbers, they get upset. But that's what you want them to be upset, right? So let's pick the stuff we can do. We need to figure out what we do to protect our district attorney who is under assault.
Oh, for
and
sure.
It's going to get worse before it gets better. The Boston Police Patrolmen's Association, in my opinion, is the closest to a Ku Klux Klan chapter in the North that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about the leadership. And anybody who doesn't know that, look at their history. They've sued us all. They sued almost every one of the elected officials. They sued Chuck Turner. They sued me. They filed a complaint with the Bar Association, right? Because that's what they do. You are not allowed to challenge them. And so if we can't get a around the table or a Zoom meeting with our commissioner, then we go to that next step. But there needs to be a conversation with our commissioner. I saw a commissioner on the West Coast who stood up in front of a mic and said, all lives matter, and he was fired before the end of the day. So how is that okay for our commissioner to stand there and say that? And in fact, what does that even mean when he says that?
Right.
What does it mean? So I see. Look, like I said, they can't do anything to me. Nothing. So I'm going to say what has to be said. I love the energy. I love seeing the young folk, or say younger, because some of y'all ain't that much younger than me, but okay. But I love seeing you all.
I'm only 35, Diane. What you talking about?
Right? Hey, I love seeing you all out there working. I want to tell everybody everything that I know. I want to share it. But that time when, looking for cameras, that ain't my thing. I want you all to know. You got to know the history. And some of us are prepared to share it. Not everybody. I'm just speaking for me. But I think, I'm trying to see. I think that's it. The thing, Mike Massey said this. He talked about you said verbal judo. Is that what they called it? So
Yeah.
think about this, people. We are actually publicly talking about on our list of things we want to do. We want them to train officers to de-escalate, because that's not how this works. I was hoping that we could get some success doing the training on de-escalating. I did not know they actually train you to escalate. And they know exactly what they're doing. There's some people who tell you, you have a right to ask a police officer why you're being detained. I used to train for the NAACP, and I tell our young folks don't do it. Why? Because that's the question that escalates the situation. Oh, you got a smart ass. Oh, you want to know? Oh, you want to talk back? then your head is up against the wall or the sidewalk. So we have to also revisit the script and what we tell our young people, how to respond when they're stopped by the police. Last thing I'll say is this: about 3 or 4 months ago, we had a young man who went on Facebook with his face all bloodied, right? All bloodied up, and said that he got stopped by the police, they beat him up, and they let him out on the corner. Within 24 hours, the commissioner of police announced a public investigation, internal investigation, but he announced an investigation. Why? Because the officer was identified by Zhao, right? The officer was identified. What happened to that? What happened to it? Make no mistake, this is not about George Floyd. This is about Bo Ramsey. This is about Mrs. Coleman's son. This is about that young man. We have to make sure when we're talking that we say that. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I worked that case and a lot of others, and that's another thing that we need to get them on, is the intimidation of people after these types of things go on.
Right.
The Trini family over there, Daryl Dukran, over there on like Geneva and Bowdoin, that family went through hell afterwards. The guy who they was harassing, is your name Kevin? What are you doing out here at 12 at night? 12 in the day, going to get a haircut. That guy, he's had hell to pay after that. Nothing happened. The case that you just talking about with that young kid, I got put in contact with him by DJ Black. DJ Black is real close with the kid and his family. Not for nothing. The kid is from an immigrant family. He's Haitian, and they scared to death of the authority and administration, and they don't want no trouble. So he just took that behind kicking and said, yo, let me keep it going, because a couple of cops had messed with him after. He said, I don't want no problems. They tried to flip it on him and say he was out there, he was drunk, he was passing out, he was peeing, or whatever it was, how they always do. But he got scared, and he didn't want no problems, so he left that alone. Yes.
Can I just one more thing? And I meant to mention that don't forget, for everybody, the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is the Chief Law Enforcement Officer, and he is whoever singular responsible to investigate and prosecute issues around police brutality, police misconduct. And I don't even want to make this about Maura Healey, because the fact is we have not had an Attorney General to prosecute a Boston police officer, even investigate one, in at least 20, 25 years. Right. It may be longer than that. But while this one wants to, she's out there, she's smiling, she wants to be down, she wants to play basketball, she wants to be what, she wants to be what, then make her do her job.
Okay. And so, not for nothing, on a point too that we can, like, I like little projects. So Rasan and Tanisha, on the legal thing. I did it one time, being a wise guy. After the Baltimore situation happened, a lot of the people were giving the Baltimore cops hell, because they were like, Baltimore cops have cost the city of Baltimore, I think it was $41 million. And I was like, shoot, I know we did that here. So I quickly tallied up my man Sean Drumgold's case. That was supposed to be $13 million. Even he got a $13 million settlement, but he never got that. They whittled it down to $3 million, but whatever. We'll call it the 13 because that's what it was adjudicated as. 13. Then it's the white girl, Victoria Snellgrove, the white boy, David Woodman. You got all those cases of wrongful incarceration, which every case of wrongful incarceration begins with wrongful arrest. So all the cases where the police have cost the city of money, and we should do it in categories. Ones that are related to brutality and killing of civilians, and then ones just for the regular court cases, like the discriminations, the wrongful terminations, all that type of stuff. And then we should do one that the city has, a column for the city, with just all their cases of discrimination and all that, because they've either paid out or have tens of millions of dollars pending right now. But I just need help compiling a more comprehensive list.
To piggyback on that, Jamal, I mean, that's a point that I was actually about to bring up, because you have, on the heels of all of these wrongful convictions, as you mentioned, that started with the wrongful arrest, that started with a false police report, that led to prosecutorial misconduct. And through each of those steps along the way, there's never any talk of justice. So I don't know if anybody's seen, there's a new Netflix show on the drug lab scandal. It's not really new, it's been out for a few months, but it's about the drug lab. I think Rasan might have made a cameo in that documentary. I think I saw him at one of the events in there. But the documentary is amazing because it really speaks to this attorney from Western Mass and his determination to really figure out, what's going on in these drug labs. So if you watch the documentary, they examined what happened and how the Attorney General's office was really at the middle of hiding evidence, destroying evidence, misconduct, and there's never been any talk of any kind of punishment or justice for all those thousands of folks who had to sit in jail because of those cases. And even when they did find out and tried to fix it, you had these lawyers who happen to be white women, nothing against white women, but they tend to get off when it's time to look at, okay, so where's the bad apples at? How did this happen? Well, it's not just the cop. The cop might be the frontline soldier in this war, but he's got a lot of accomplices that lead to mass incarceration. So unless we have to focus some attention on the prosecutorial misconduct, on the DA, on the AG, and on all these other.
Damn, I think we just lost him. But yeah, he's absolutely right. To go back to what I was saying before about the study, I think would inform a lot of that because it's going to show you how bad the problem is. I just put in a link to I forget what it is, NPR or one of them in-depth news shows. Their list, a secret list of convicted cops. They did the study, what I'm talking about. They did a study like that in California. It turned up like 1,500 cops, and it was just it was crazy everything that was on there. And that's the type of thing I want done here, and that is going to inform a lot of what we know because. Too, if you have Officer Sullivan, who's had, 15 drunk drivings, somebody's going to be able to ask that court, how does a guy with 15 drunk drivings, how is he still here? How did you let this happen? So it is definitely, it's a racism and white supremacy is on autopilot, and it has a support system that goes with it. It's not just the cops. It's a whole thing. Cornell says he got kicked out. How did he get kicked out? That's crazy. Hold on. I didn't hit no button. But all right, well, I'm telling him to come back. Hopefully he comes back in. He should be able to dial back in. But if an officer is convicted of a felony, they cannot be allowed to continue on the department. Right. But once again, getting convicted of a felony, if you're an officer, they got the Donald Trump thing. They could shoot somebody in Times Square and get away with it. That's what I'm saying. We're seeing arrests. We're seeing charges for a lot of this stuff. But then it walks away and then you don't hear anything. Y'all remember the captain just viciously beat his wife at his house in Milton. That case was so crazy because one, he was on duty. He wasn't supposed to be at home in Milton. He was in his uniform. He was in a BPD cruiser. Okay, here comes C coming back. He was in a BPD cruiser. Milton police tried to stop him. He didn't stop for them. They even helped flip the story on that. They was like, oh, he didn't hear us or whatever. No, I got the story from other cops. He fled. All this is known. He got desk duty after beating his wife. Now his wife ain't saying nothing. It's not going to go anywhere in court. So once again, here we have a thing. Everybody knows what happened, but nothing happened. So, and he's a captain. So he's not even going to get so much as demoted. You know what I mean? The way things are, with his connections that he is, in another 15 years, we might be looking at the future commissioner. All right. But let's wrap this up. See if you're back. Please get back in and finish your point. Let's see. C should be back in here. Yeah.
Hello? Yeah, I'm back on. I must have just passed out, but yeah, no, I was just agreeing with your point and just putting a little emphasis on it because you were speaking about as far as like the economics of it, and I think Louis Elisa had mentioned it earlier. When you think about the bottom line in terms of the salaries, in terms of the money spent and the budget, that whole issue around just police misconduct and payments that have gone out has to be well over $50 million. Just in the 3 or 4 cases that you mentioned, that's $50 million that could go towards education, healthcare, the tons of different programs. So when people are trying to really change this defunding conversation and make it a political thing, and now the black man is the boogeyman in terms of oh, you're gonna defund the police. That means I got to look out for these cavemen out here snatching old ladies' purses, and nobody's going to be there to stop them. But at the end of the day, it's really about taking a closer look at all of the misuse, all of the money that we could be spending in a different way, all the money that we could avoid spending, where you have an officer who's volatile, you have an officer who has 2 or 3 complaints. He should be off the force. Why wait till he gets 7, 8, 9 complaints and potentially kill somebody? And there was someone who made a mention earlier about these officers, and once they get on the force and they have an incident, that's not their first rodeo, so to speak. That's not the first incident they've had. I know in my just personal experience, there was one gentleman who used to work with me who used the N-word one day. A few years later, he becomes a cop. A few years later, he ends up killing somebody. So if you look at the progression, when he used the N-word, it was swept under the rug. It was kind of ignored. It was, let's not address it. And then he ends up being one of the main actors on the BPD who ends up killing one of the folks involved, not officer, but Mark McMullen. One of the victims ends up getting killed by a gentleman who used to work at the DA's office, used to be an investigator. So now he's on the force, he's carrying a badge. His racism and his mental, it's already known. It's already known that he has a dislike for black people. He ends up on the force carrying a gun, working in Boston, and he ends up killing somebody. That's a problem.
And he's still on the force.
Yes.
And after he killed that person, 6 or 9 months later, you'll see a national trend. It happened in the DJ Henry case too, where all of a sudden, wink, wink, they want to show, attaboy, we support you. And, about 9 months later or so, they get some sort of award, from their little good old boys, Fraternal Order of Police or whatever it is, So just like that, Officer Cornell's talking about is Chris Carr, who's had multiple infractions while he was on the force, a known bad apple. And they awarded him about 9 months after that, really ultimately as a show of support for him and as a slap in the face to us. But in any event, so I want to begin to wrap this up here. So I want to say, so what we're doing is we're keeping an eye on what the state electeds have proposed, right? Their 10-point program or whatever they're calling it. We need to fine tooth comb that. And also, too, I need to see it in its totality because what they issue to the public is just bullet points. You know what I mean? So I need to see it really fleshed out, right? And we need to get up in there with the fine tooth comb. So we're looking at that stuff from the electeds. Now, locally, too, I know Andrea Campbell is working on some stuff at the city level around co-op and civilian review board. Julia Mejia is working around some stuff around the economics and what they were calling for defunding. She is talking about strategic reallocation of funds, right? As well as some other stuff that I brought up with her, some of these other city ideas that got lost, like the little name tags and all that other type of stuff. Us demanding that there's some sort of community process for the next time around when it's time to choose a commissioner, those type of things. Of course, also what the NAACP has now put out, and Tanisha as soon as you have that, because I know what you sent me, but I didn't know if that was like a draft or that was the final ready for public consumption. But if we have a PDF or something, we could spread that to the group as well, because we want to be supportive of the NAACP thing. And I know based on my conversations with Tanisha, it is more fleshed out and more, you know, digging into these things. And it has some of the things talking about the mental health and, these type of aspects that were more nuanced that we talked about. So that's basically the recap where we're going. The next thing that I am doing is a forum on Monday. Growing up as a kid, people would be like, yo, you talking to the police? Right? That was a big thing. You can't be talking to the police. And now as this conversation is going on, a lot of people have said, yo, well, what are the Black and Latino cops? What do they think about this? Right? And, you know, being that I know a lot of cops, I'm like, yo, we need to have that conversation, because a lot of these cops too, look, they got Black sons, right? So they worry too. Not for nothing, these cops, when they're not in uniform, they worry too. Some of them, even when you in uniform, it don't matter, or on duty. You know, they beat the brakes off of Michael Cox because his colleagues didn't recognize him as an undercover officer. So, you know, before you got the blue uniform on, you got the Black uniform on, and they feel it too. Now, how many of them are willing to talk about it, how much they're willing to talk about, and what they will do if asked to be required of them, like a guy like me is gonna ask, are y'all willing to snitch on some bad cops? You know all the bad cops. Help me form a list. And if you a coward, snitch anonymously. It's okay. We won't tell, right? But y'all know the dirt. You know the officers who sniffing the cocaine. You know the officers who squeezing the young ladies' butts. You know the officers that's doing all the dirt. You know that. And that's that information that we need. But all right, y'all, so I think that's about it. Anybody have any final comments, final questions, or anything like that before we wrap it up?
Thank you, brother, for all that you're doing. Just thank you for, keep trying to hold it down and get people together to have these discussions. That's all I can say. I really appreciate it, and it's really helpful for me.
That's what I would say too. So thank you, brother.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you
Jamal.
for this platform.
Jamal, thank you for everything that you've been.
And you, man, for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamal, for all that you do and continue to do. Thanks for everyone that was sharing. Folks know I've been saying, put it on paper. Just keep popping off. Like let's not stop until we see the documentation and we start seeing the systematic change we're all looking for. So thanks, Jamal, for everything you've been doing.
Oh, what's good, Darren? How are you?
I'm good, miss.
Appreciate you.
All right. And thank y'all, because not for nothing, I try to keep it real simple. I'm not one of these people who's like, ready to put the Julius Caesar leaves around my head just yet. So,
even though you've been criticized to be.
Yeah, of course, but whatever. at the end of the day, really, it's like how them old actors say, it's not me, it's you. Because see, it wouldn't work if this was a Zoom call and there's only one square on it that says Jamal Crawford. It doesn't work the same. So, teamwork makes the dream work. It's only a plan if we work it. And that's the type of thing. What I've been trying to do is to really get the community on it. I'm not your leader. I'm your brother. I'm your servant. But and as Diane was saying, we talking about getting in where we fit in. This one knows that or whatever. If it's something that comes to do with journalism, I defer to Chris Ferrone. If it's something legal, I'm deferring to Rasan or Tanisha. If it's something emergency management related, I'm deferring to Lewis. So there's certain things that we have in our own sphere of expertise and experience already. We don't need too much more. The only thing we really need is to add on and get more people. As one of my elders say, may our tribe increase. That's what we need to do. So really that's it, y'all. Please spread the word. This has been recorded. I probably should have told y'all that in the beginning. Sorry. Nobody's on there doing nothing crazy or picking your nose.
Wouldn't expect anything less from you, Jamal.
Exactly. So for anybody who came in late, it will be available, so you'll see the whole thing. Anybody that wants to go back, miss something, take notes. I'll be listening to it again. Take notes. And please, everything in the chat, Really, there's been a lot of links in there and all that. Please, I hope y'all been checking out the stuff that's in the chat, all the different links and whatnot to the websites and all the information, because a lot of that stuff is there. We're going to keep it moving. Let's spread the word for the next thing. And if y'all know any cops, cops who got some sense, cops who can have an intelligent, rational, mature discussion, right?
Well, I was gonna ask you, don't you know Eddie? What's his last name? The brother that just got promoted. Yeah, Crispin. You know him, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, I know him, but I don't know him good. But yeah, I invited him. He's the president of Mamleo right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that he should have been involved in stuff like this, you know?
Absolutely. I put the word out to him, but he's not a guy who I could just like pick up the phone and call like a lot of the other people.
I got somebody, so I'll call.
Okay. And I told Larry Ellison too, the former president. So I told him to tell him as well. So all that. So we there. So Rasan, Tanisha, hopefully, you know, maybe we could work on that, trying to get a list of how much these fools have cost us in money, right? And that we could add that to this thing as well. And I think that's about it. Everybody good?
Everybody's good.
All right. Peace, everybody. Thank you.
Be safe.
Love y'all. Be safe.
Much
All
love.
right, thank you, brother.
Peace.
No, I think they already all logged off. Rasan?
Yeah, they gone.
Thanks, Jamal.
All right.
He did. Thank y'all.